Well, the Trump administration has released thousands of files related to renowned aviator Amelia Earhart, who vanished in 1937 during her attempt to become the first woman to circumnavigate the world. The Director of National Intelligence said the release was about finding and telling the truth, though many experts say the information was already widely available. Laurie Gwen Shapiro is a filmmaker, journalist, and author who has spent years researching Amelia Earhart's life, and she joins me now. Laurie, good to have you with us today, early morning where you are. Firstly, not much has been made about these 4,000 or so files that have been released, but is there anything of interest that's come out of them?
To be honest with you, those of us who are very connected to the Earhart community are not expecting anything to come out of these files. I think they're conveniently timed, if you know what I mean. But there is always an interest in Amelia Earhart as a mystery. As the researcher of the book, The Aviator and the Showman, the aviator is Amelia Earhart, and her husband is George Palmer Putnam, the showman. They made a lot of mistakes on this planning together as a married couple of this very last journey that Amelia Earhart would take. It is in 1937. It is the height of the Great Depression. They are very broke. And what I like to show in my book is there's so many archives that are available that are showing that this is in fact a tragedy foretold, that Amelia herself was making tremendously poor decisions along with her husband. They left behind important equipment. She did not learn Morse code. Her navigator, Fred Noonan, did not learn Morse code. This was her second attempt to go around the equator. That was the gimmick. It was basically a flight that was not pushing aviation forward or feminism forward like her other flights were. This was, in fact, a retirement plan. There was a tremendous amount of money that was riding on this, including radio deals and newspaper deals and a film deal set up, the equivalent of about $3 million. And she was rushing to get home. She also was coming from an Australian mandate region, which was now Papua New Guinea. And her navigator, Fred Noonan, came cheaply. He was a tremendous celestial navigator, but he was drinking heavily in the days right up to the flight, which I discovered on newly released recordings that are already out there called the Amelia Earhart Project, which are at the Smithsonian. Even people in the Asia Pacific region can just get it right now from their living room. The last person to talk to Amelia Earhart is recorded on these interviews from the early 70s by an aviator expert named Elgin Long. And he's talking about how Amelia is frantic. She has run out of fuel. There's a lot of money to be made on nonsense. And there was also a lot of propaganda that was out there that has filtered into the public imagination. But my take, and as well as the Smithsonian and many other top experts, is that she simply was ill prepared for this flight. She was very sick. She got dysentery starting in Indonesia. And then by the time she got to Australia, she was in Darwin. She was very sick. She lost a good amount of pounds or kilos, if I'm talking to this region. And by the time that she's getting on that flight in Lae, New Guinea, which is an Australian-run town, it is there's planes there because of the gold industry. She's begging someone, an Australian man named Harry Balfour, to get on the plane because she realizes that she doesn't know Morse code. She has not taken the time to learn Morse code. Neither does Fred Noonan know Morse code. And in many ways, if they had someone who was a radio operator like Harry Balfour to come on, they would have been alive. But his boss, Eric Chater, another Australian, said, no, we're not going to let go of our radio operator because our planes will crash. So she got on that plane knowing that she was in risk. This is a small island, Howland Island, which is the size of New York Central
Oh.
Park. It's very small, hard to see from the sky. There's a certain amount of fuel. If you miss it, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yes.
So that's my take.
Yes, and given the sort of conventional wisdom of what's happened, she ran out of fuel. But why do you think her story continues to endure? Why are people so obsessed about finding a different narrative about what happened to her, Fred Noonan, and her plane?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things at play. At the very start of it is all the people love a mystery. But let's go back to the history of how this became a mystery. In the 1930s and 37, nobody doubted that she disappeared and fell into the Pacific Ocean with Noonan or it sank or in 1941, her death becomes much more valuable as U.S. propaganda. There is a film called Flight for Freedom that is made in which spy movies are very big during World War II, and there's a movie that is basically with Rosalind Russell, who's a big star at the time, as an Amelia Earhart like figure who's a spy. And this was seen by over 1 million American soldiers who then would start to spot Amelia Earhart. Among my research items I discovered were archives at the University of New Hampshire, where there's a conspiracy theorist named Paul Brand, who's trying to basically get more of a splash for a book that he got. He got a very low advance. I found cash checks from his witnesses that were saying that they saw Amelia Earhart. There's just so much propaganda. In the 60s, the story starts to escalate, and people realize they can make money. At that time, people were doubting governments, and there was all sorts of theories going around. And it came to a fever pitch, including being on American 60 Minutes of she's at Saipan. And there's also a lot of people who were military men who had a lot of hatred towards the Japanese region because of Pearl Harbor. There's some racism at play in this continued decision that Amelia Earhart, was taken by the Japanese. Then there's more nonsense that comes out. Believe it or not, there's people still today who believe that she came back and was a housewife in New Jersey. That was a popular book in the 70s. And even very big American historians would put nonsense in their book, not seeing their own prejudices when they investigated. But if you actually go into the archives, Amelia herself tells us on the Coast Guard records that she's out of fuel. And now I beg anyone who really doubts me to listen, Google the Amelia Earhart Project, and listen to the people who spoke to her last. She's frantic. They say she's frantic, and she's out of fuel. And she's also not flying hundreds and hundreds of miles away to there's all sorts of other new stuff that there's her flight, her plane might have been found. It's not hundreds of miles away. It's almost definitely within the region of Howland Island. And as anyone listening to this broadcast knows, the Pacific is a very big place and very deep.
Yes, and on that note, I mean, given
yeah.
all those conspiracy theories that are there, and you mentioned how big the Pacific is, will we continue finally to see expeditions to try to find the wreckage again in the years to come?
The thing we have to do as informed people is follow the money. Is there money to be made off of nonsense? And are people putting out press releases that they found something before there's actually evidence? There is a group that I think is pretty good, as well as the Smithsonian curators, called Nauticus. They don't put out anything that they've found the plane. They're eliminating spots, and actually where she's not is really valuable information. That's how many found objects, even if I could call the Titanic an object, was not found right away. You start eliminating spots, and they're also working with radio and science, and they're very cautious. So I do think in our lifetime that Amelia Earhart's plane will be found. I think it's at the bottom of the ocean. And remember, she's out of fuel. So it didn't explode. And at that level below the ocean, things get preserved. So you're not going to see bones, but what you might find is like shoes or buttons if anyone's a Titanic buff. And also amazingly, paper actually preserves. You can, if you look at the Titanic stuff, you could see newspapers that we can read. And, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, were communicating with a jerry-rigged fishing pole. It was so noisy in there. And the notes might exist, or mechanical papers might exist that are in the pilot's seat. So that's something that I would be looking forward to. But I would not think that there's anything about. She was not on a spy mission. She was a militant pacifist, if I could call her that. She's not a spy. She's trying to make money. There's a lot of money riding on this.
Yes,
this
of course, and it will be quite the story, when that aircraft is found.
Absolutely,
as you think.
But it's not going to.
Well, time has run out, Laurie Gwen Shapiro, but
Sure.
really do appreciate your time with us today. Thank you.
I appreciate you having me on, and I just would tell everybody that to be really careful when you're listening to stories and follow the money.
Absolutely. Thank you.